This is lecture 4. Namaskar. We will continue with the resident status. To recall, residential status is purely an income tax status. It is a status in accordance with the Income Tax Act 1961 only. As I told you yesterday, it has no direct nexus with the citizenship. In the residential status determination, there are largely two residential statuses, as we have discussed: resident and non-resident. Resident and non-resident. To determine this status, resident or non-resident, citizenship is of no consequence. We have already discussed the basic conditions to become a resident. We will hurriedly go through those conditions. 182 days stay in India is essential. 182 days or more stay in India is essential for a person to achieve resident as the residential status. There are two conditions, as we have discussed. One is 182 days or more in a previous year. Previous year means April to March. Other is 365 days in the last 4 previous years and 60 days in the current previous year would be sufficient to make a person resident in India. Any of the two conditions, one of the two conditions may be satisfied for a person to be qualifying as a resident in India. If a person does not satisfy any of the conditions, he will be considered to be non-resident in India. Being a non-resident has its own tax advantages. There are many citizens of India and other foreigners also who clamor to have the non-resident status in India for the reason that it is tax advantageous to them. As we have discussed, for a non-resident, only Indian incomes become chargeable to Indian income tax. Foreign incomes of a non-resident do not become chargeable to Indian income tax. So once a person achieves a resident as his residential status, there will be the test of resident and ordinarily resident and resident but not ordinarily resident to be applied. Please understand, for a resident there are two statuses: resident and ordinarily resident, resident but not ordinarily resident. In the textbook, the methodology to understand resident but not ordinarily resident has been given. You may follow the textbook, not an issue, but I will firstly give you the provisions in the Act. Section 6, it says that for a person to be considered to be resident but not ordinarily resident, for a person to be considered as resident but not ordinarily resident, he should be non-resident. It is important. He should be non-resident in 9 out of 10 in at least 9 out of 10 preceding previous years. So our assessment year is 2021, 1920 is our previous year. So for the previous years preceding 1920, 10 previous years preceding 1920, of those 10 you should be resident at least in 9 previous years. If he is a resident, non-resident in at least 9 out of those 10 previous years, non-resident in at least 9 out of those 10 preceding previous years, then he would be considered to be resident but not ordinarily resident. There is other way by which he can achieve this resident but not ordinary resident status. That is, he can stay in India in the preceding 7 previous years for a period of 729 days or less. So the other condition for a person to achieve the status of resident but not ordinarily resident is 729 days or less in the 7 preceding previous years. So any of those conditions, 9 out of 10 non-resident, 729 days or less in the last 7 preceding previous years. Any of them may be satisfied, so that he will be considered to be resident but not ordinarily resident in the previous year 1920, assessment year 2021. I hope this is clear. Having resident but not ordinarily resident status is important. Please understand. People clamor to have non-resident status. After having become non-resident, they are having advantages in taxation. After the non-resident status, before they become resident and ordinarily resident, the intermittent status, in between status between non-resident and resident but not ordinarily resident, the in between status is resident but not ordinarily resident. How do you define a resident and ordinarily resident? The resident is, for all practical purposes, resident and ordinarily resident. So in fact there are 3 statuses, basically 2, resident and non-resident. But you may understand, for the purpose of your understanding, that there are 3 residential statuses. Resident, when we say resident, what we mean is resident and ordinarily resident. Second, resident but not ordinarily resident. We have discussed 2 conditions. 9 out of 10 preceding previous years, he should be non-resident, or 729 days or less in the 7 previous years, he should be staying in India. One of the conditions may be satisfied, he becomes resident but not ordinarily resident, and the third status is non-resident. I hope this is now clear to you. A person who is not a resident is a non-resident. A person who does not satisfy the basic conditions of residence is a non-resident. A person who satisfies the basic condition of resident generally would be considered to be resident and ordinarily resident. But for a person to have that intermittent status, in between status of resident but not ordinarily resident, he has to satisfy one of those 2 conditions, 9 on 10 and 729 days or less. I am emphatic. It is resident but not ordinarily resident status is an intermittent status. Of the three statuses, the most important status which a person will like to retain is non-resident. If he cannot be non-resident in a particular previous year, he will try to be resident but not ordinarily resident. This resident but not ordinarily resident has certain advantages which I will discuss with you. Section 5 read with section 6. As we have discussed, for a resident, world incomes, when I say world incomes, what I mean is Indian incomes and foreign incomes are both subjected to tax in India. See, we have DTAAs, double tax avoidance agreement, which I am not discussing with you now. Your syllabus doesn't warrant, but maybe sometime in the class I will discuss that with you. That is a very important provision, a very important treaties India has entered into with several foreign countries. Double tax, as the name suggests, double tax avoidance agreements. I will discuss this with you in the class later. Now come to a resident, world incomes, Indian and foreign, chargeable to tax in India. Please understand, foreign incomes of a resident would also be chargeable to tax in the foreign country. For example, you may have your brother in America. He earns income in America. He pays American income tax. But if he happens to be resident in India in a previous year, despite having paid tax in America on his American income, he would also be required to pay tax in India on the American incomes. He will always be required to pay tax on his Indian incomes in India, irrespective of his status, resident or not or non-resident. Indian incomes always chargeable to tax in India. Foreign incomes become chargeable to tax in India if he is a resident, mind you. So, resident is in a way a status which brings taxability in respect of all incomes, Indian and foreign. Non-resident, as I have told you, I will repeat, non-resident, foreign incomes are not chargeable to tax in India for a non-resident. Indian incomes only suffer Indian income tax. Come to resident but not ordinarily resident, his taxability. A resident but not ordinarily resident will have certain tax advantage. For a resident, as we have discussed, world incomes are chargeable to Indian income tax. For a resident who is not an ordinarily resident, there are advantages. In respect of income accruing or arising outside India, in respect of income accruing or arising outside India, for a resident but not ordinarily resident, there will be no taxability in India. Please understand, residental status is not a lifetime status. It has to be determined for each year. Please understand, residental status has to be determined for each year. Citizenship is perpetual, perennial, continuous, unless revoked. Once a person is deprived of citizenship, only then he ceases to be a citizen. Otherwise, he remains a citizen. That is not the case with the residental status. Residental status each year may change. Sometimes you may be resident, sometimes you may be non-resident, sometimes you may be resident but not ordinarily resident. Statuses keep on changing. So we are discussing the year in which you are resident but not ordinarily resident. For that year only. Please understand, for that year only you have an advantage. What is that? in respect of income accruing or arising outside India, there is no taxability in India. In respect of income accruing or arising outside India for a resident but not ordinarily resident, there will be no taxability in India. However, as I told you, income tax mein there is nothing is simple. It is very complex. There is a rider to it. What did I tell you? Income accruing or arising outside India is not chargeable to tax in India in respect of a resident but not ordinarily resident. Only for that year. In the year in which he has this R but NOR status, there is no taxability in respect of income accruing or arising outside India. However, if the income accruing or arising outside India is from a business controlled in India or a profession set up in India, if the income accruing or arising outside India is from a business controlled in India or profession set up in India, if that is the case, then even in respect of that R but NOR, this advantage, meaning no taxability, is not available. So in other words, if a resident but not ordinarily resident R but NOR has income accruing or arising outside India from business which is controlled in India, or he has income from a profession which is set up in India, income accruing or arising outside India from a business controlled in India or from a profession, income accruing or arising outside India from a profession which is controlled in India, then in that case, that advantage, no taxability, is not available, exemption is not available. He will be liable to pay tax if the business or profession is controlled in India. I hope I am making myself abundantly clear. This was Residential Status Section 6 with its various clauses. I think I did not explain the term assessment. Section 2, Clause 8, assessment, definition of assessment. I think I have missed out on this. I did not explain in detail. Assessment includes reassessment, is what is the simple definition given of assessment. But that's not all. I need to explain to you as to what is assessment. Now, assessment is the process of determining the income, levying, meaning charging tax on that income, and also recovering the tax on that income. Please understand, process of determining, charging and recovering tax is the process of assessment. It is the exercise undertaken by the department. There are various sections which deal with assessment. Section 143, 143.1, 143.3, 148, 153, 263, there are so many sections. 154, they all deal with assessment, some or the other kind of assessment. So, assessment is the process of determination of the income firstly, the tax liability thereon, and the recovery of the tax having so determined. That is the process of assessment. Now, the consequence of assessment, an assessee may be required to pay tax. As I told you, tax does not only mean tax, it will mean interest, it will mean penalty also, it will mean fees also. There are various types of fees payable under the Income Tax Act, 234E, for example, late fee. So, tax, interest penalty or fee payable is the consequence of the assessment. It can also be the reverse case, meaning as a result of assessment, you may be eligible, you may be entitled to a refund. It may be. You may have paid taxes more than what is due from you. Your tax liability may be rupees 5 lakhs, you may have paid 8 lakhs. So you will get 3 lakh rupees refund. How will you get it? Unless the assessment takes place, you will never get the refund. So assessment is the process of determination of the income and the tax thereon and the recovery, the payment of the tax. Now there may be a refund, the government will grant refund to you along with interest. Section 244 capital A grants you the interest as well on 3 lakh rupees refund due to you. Okay, so this is the process of assessment. Now let me come to section 9. It will take me a lot of time to explain section 9. It is a very interesting section. Of course, Bombay University may not lay much emphasis on this section. Your questions may not be based on section 9, but then it is equally an important section. One judgment, I will give you section 9(1)(1), which says it deals with income accruing or arising, deemed to accrue or arise in India. Now please understand, it is a deeming fiction. It deals with cases and says that the income, if it falls in the cases discussed by this section, those incomes will be considered to be deeming to accruing or arising in India. Deeming fiction. Deeming fiction. Once you are attracted to that section 9(1)(1) and 9(1), there are various clauses in it. It will be considered that the income is accruing or arising in India. Income, whether directly or indirectly, through or from, it is important. I will read a few part of the section 9(1)(1) so that I will be able to explain it better as it is. Whether directly or indirectly, through or from. Through or from. Please understand, the words used are through or from. A business connection in India, or directly or indirectly, through or from. A property in India, directly or indirectly, through or from. Any asset or source of income in India. So there are 3 conditions here. One of them may be satisfied for the income to be deemed to be accrue or arise in India. When it arises, whether directly or indirectly. I am using the word directly and indirectly both. In my later explanation, I will be emphatically using the word only directly for a different purpose. So please bear in mind, each word in the section has to be given due credence. You cannot ignore a word. You cannot even ignore a comma in a section. Forget word. You cannot, as you cannot ignore, so also you cannot add. Neither can you add a comma nor can you add a word in a section. What is written is sacrosanct, is religious, is sacrosanct. You have to attach a lot of sanctimony to it. It is the Bible. The written section is the Bible. So whether directly or indirectly, through or from any business connection in India, or a property in India, or any asset or source of income in India. Here the words used are directly or indirectly, through or from. And in the 4th limb, there are 3 limbs. In the 4th limb, they say whether directly or indirectly, through. The word or from is absent here. Through. Transfer of a capital asset situated in India, or from, which is existing in the earlier 3 limbs, is absent here. It only says income arising, whether directly or indirectly, through not from. Transfer of a capital asset. Here they are not using the word asset. In the third limb they use the word asset. Here they are using the word capital asset. Situate in India. This is extremely important. Of course, at your level, the professional interpretation of this may not be of much relevance, but I am reminded of a very interesting case law. Vodafone, one of the very interesting case laws, a landmark judgment which is very important, not only from the department point of view but also from the assessee point of view. Now I'll give you a brief insight into this judgment of Vodafone. Judgment of Vodafone, the amount of tax involved in Vodafone was 20,000 crores. Mind you, when this case was decided in 2012, the transaction took place in 2007. That time the collection, if I remember correctly, tax collection in India was around 6 lakh crores. Again 6 lakh, 20,000 crores was the tax demand only from one single person, Vodafone. The facts are very interesting. Tax planning has been done by Vodafone for years together prior to actually attracting this tax by the order passed by the department. It is very interesting. Students of commerce, before I give you the contents of Vodafone, students of commerce are aware that a company and shareholders are different entities. What do you mean by saying different entities? What do we mean by saying different entities? Meaning ABC Private Limited may have 3 shareholders, A, B and C, and they may also be directors. A, B and C are also directors. Company has been incorporated under the Indian Companies Act 2013, for example, or in 1956 Act, or in accordance with 1956 Act. Company is an artificial person, you are aware. All that what you can do, the company can also do. We have a natural existence. A company has a legal existence. The law recognizes the company as a person. You can purchase properties, the company can also purchase properties. You can form a company, company can also form a company. You can enter into a partnership, company can also enter into a partnership, and so on. So company is far different from its constituents, meaning the shareholders, largely the shareholders, and also the directors. Coming to our case, ABC Private Limited, A, B, C shareholders, A, B, C also directors. When I say they are different entities, what do we mean? What we mean is, if the shareholders of the company were to expire, all the shareholders, let us say, were to expire on the same day, let us say in an accident, ABC are shareholders, they expire, they were also directors. Does it mean the company comes to an end? The answer is no. The legal heir of A, B and C will become the shareholders. They will appoint the directors also. The company continues. A, B, C may die, yet the company continues. This is the meaning of company, and shareholders have a different existence. They are different entities. They are related to each other, but they are not the same. That's the meaning of different entities for the purpose of accounts and for the purpose of law. Liabilities of company are not the liabilities of shareholders. Liabilities of shareholders are not the liabilities of the company. Simple as that. Different existence for accounts purposes. Shareholders will maintain their own books of accounts. A, his own books of accounts. B, his own books of accounts. C, his own books of accounts. ABC Private Limited, its own books of accounts. They are different. This is exactly what Vodafone Supreme Court judgment says. Nothing new. Chief Justice, as he then was, S.H. Kapadia, exactly stated this. The question before the Supreme Court, which the Supreme Court answered, is the question which the teachers of class 11 asked the students when they introduce company law to them, when they introduce the provisions of company to them, company formation to them. Simple. Company and directors, company and shareholders are different persons. Let me give you the facts, because section 911 cannot be discussed without Vodafone discussion. Vodafone is a very, very interesting case law. I'll just give you in brief. Now, Vodafone, prior to it becoming Vodafone, this Vodafone company that you see now in our country, before that it was Hutch, and prior to that it was Maxtouch. Vodafone is a British company. Parent company is British company. Now, Hutch India was a subsidiary company of Hutch Singapore. I'll give you in brief, I'm not going into detailed analysis of that. Hutch Singapore was a subsidiary of a company, again Hutch Group itself, based in Mauritius. So several companies which were subsidiaries of a parent company. There was one parent company, it had several subsidiaries. Those subsidiaries had invested money in Hutch India. So company